Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Morning heat rolled across Bagram airfield, the kind that made the runway shimmer and the dust hang low. Riley Morgan tightened her flight gloves and watched the flight line breathe, crews moving, rotors ticking, fuel trucks crawling like they had all the time in the world. She didn't. Not today. Dean Callahan jogged up with a coffee and a grin. Briefing in 5, Captain. You ready to dance? Riley smirked. I'm ready. Let's just hope the band plays the same song. Blake Monroe stepped out of the shade of the Black Hawk cockpit, headset slung around his neck. Bird is green. Nav is good. Radar is clean. Riley nodded but felt that quiet pull in her gut, the small voice that had saved her more than once. Something was off and she didn't know why. Inside the ops tent, the generator hummed and the map table glowed under cold light. Colonel Marcus Reeves stood with arms folded, jaw tight. Target is a cut-off asset near Shamal Valley, he said. Terrain's narrow, air is dirty, and the intel says movement on the ridges. We go low, in and out. Dean traced the route with a finger. We thread the pass, drop the team, pick up the package, back to base before anyone blinks. Riley watched the elevation line stack like teeth. We're exposed here and here, she said, tapping 2 choke points. If someone's holding a tube, that's where they wait. Reeves met her eyes. You lead the bird because you see these things. Keep it tight, keep it fast. She gave a short nod. Orders were orders. The feeling didn't fade. On the ramp, the Black Hawk looked scuffed and stubborn, paint scarred by sun and grit. Riley ran a hand along the fuselage the way she always did. Do right by me, and I'll bring you home. The turbine spooled, the cockpit came alive, and Blake's voice settled in her headset like a steady hand. Engine 1 good. Engine 2 good. Gauges in the green. Dean strapped in across the cabin and shot her a thumbs up. Outside, ground crew ducked under the rotor wash as the dust kicked up hard. Riley eased the collective, felt the weight lift, and the base shrank beneath them until it was just shapes in a sea of tan. They flew nap of the earth across barren flats and broken ridges, the sun throwing long bars of shadow that they slipped through like they were part of the landscape. Radio chatter was thin, just the way she liked it. Blake called wind and altitude, Riley kept the nose low and the profile dirty. Radar echo looks clean, Blake said. Probably ground clutter. Riley's jaw worked. Or someone being quiet. Dean leaned to the door, scanning the ridgelines. No heat plumes. No trucks. It's a ghost road. Ghosts don't shoot, Riley said, but her eyes never left the horizon. They hit the first pass and the air got choppy. Rock walls pinched close enough to feel, the kind of flying that punished sloppy hands. Riley's were not sloppy. She bled altitude, stole a sliver of sky, and slid them through. The second pass waited like a dare. 2 minutes to initial, Blake said. Copy, Riley answered. Her heartbeat slowed the way it always did before the point of no return. She checked fuel, checked instruments, checked the wind that scraped along the ridge tops. The voice in her gut got louder. She pressed it down and flew. Eyes up, she said. If this goes sideways, we take it left and low. Dean tapped the door frame twice. Left and low. The valley opened ahead, wider than the map made it look, but somehow tighter too. Sand blew in faint veils across the floor of it. No villagers. No herders. No birds. Just heat and silence, and the distant glint of rock. Blake's hand hovered near the countermeasures switch out of habit. Riley didn't tell him to move it. She didn't have to. Command, Eagle 1 on approach, she called. Static chewed the reply into nothing. She tried again and got the same grit-filled silence. Blake frowned at the panel. Might be interference. Dean muttered, or a blanket. Riley kept her voice even. We're committed. The nose dropped a hair, the rotors dug in, and the Black Hawk slid into Shamal Valley like a shadow that didn't want to be seen, the team bracing without a word as the walls closed in and the world got very, very small, and then the valley snapped its trap. A glint on the ridge, a puff of smoke, and Riley's mouth was already moving. Contact, 2 o'clock high, possible tube. Blake's thumb punched the switch. Flares spat bright and mean, burning trails across the air. The first missile slid past and burst off their right, the shockwave slapping the cabin. Second plume. Dean yelled. Riley dumped altitude, rolled left, felt the wall of rock reach out for them. Warning tones screamed. The second missile curled like it could think. It struck the tail with a punch that felt personal. The Hawk spun. Instruments went dirty. The world turned into Skysand sky in a strobe that didn't stop. Brace! Riley shouted. She fought the stick, found the flattest lie she could, rode it down hard. Impact. Metal screamed. Glass popped. Dust and fuel hit like a fist to the lungs. Riley's harness cut deep, then she was hanging crooked, ears ringing, mouth full of grit. Blake. Dean. No answer. She cut herself loose, dropped, stumbled, dragged a panel aside. Dean was slumped at the bulkhead, eyes empty in a way she knew too well. Blake coughed once, shallow and wrong. Stay with me, she rasped, pressing a shaking hand to his shoulder. A truck engine growled somewhere beyond the smoke. Voices. Not English. Rounds chewed the wreckage. Sparks jumped. Riley reached for her sidearm and came up with sand. She crabbed behind a bent strut, grabbed a shard of aluminum like a knife. Boots pounded in. Rough hands yanked her out, slammed her face first into the dirt, plastic ties biting her wrists. She kicked, got a knee in for trouble, ate a rifle but for it. The sky narrowed to white, then came back meaner. They hauled her to a ring of men with scarves and cheap radios. One stepped in closer than the rest, calm eyes, clean beard, a red scarf that caught the wind. Farid al-Rashid didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. American pilot, he said, as if reading a tag. Riley stared right through him. Fix your radios, she said. You're stepping on each other. A quick smile, not friendly. He picked the patch from her sleeve with 2 fingers, rolled it, tucked it in his pocket like a chip won at a table. You live because I say you live. He nodded once. For now. They dragged her to a truck. Heat pressed in, smoke from the crushed Hawk drifted and clung. She twisted her wrists, testing the tie, feeling the bite and the give, storing the map of every step, the slope by the dry wash, the old tire, the burnt scrub, the diesel stink from the second vehicle. A boy with a rifle looked at her too long. She looked back until he looked away. The ride was rough. Gravel popped. Voices rose and fell. When they pulled her out, the sun was lower and the airfield was not American, it was a beaten patch of hardpan with a rusted Soviet-era bird coughing smoke and a line of men waiting to be told what to do. Farid walked like he owned the ground. He stopped her in front of everyone. Speak to the camera. Tell them your country is weak. She squinted past him, found the wind line, the mirage shimmer beyond the fuel drums, the tower with 2 bent antennas. Hard pass, she said. The first hit wasn't wild, it was measured. A backhand to wake a response. Riley tasted iron and gave him nothing. Hours blurred. A tin room. A bare bulb. Questions that circled. Silence that cost. By dusk they hauled her out again. The helicopter thumped at idle, rotors combing the heat. Farid's scarf snapped like it was proud of the wind. From the sky you came, he said. To the sky you return. 2 men gripped her arms. The knot on her wrists cut deeper. Riley lifted her chin and squared her shoulders like the ground hadn't tried to break her bones an hour ago. Dean's empty eyes flashed behind hers, Blake's last cough rode the back of her throat, and the small voice inside her, that stubborn pilot's voice, clicked the checklist she couldn't switch off: angle, air, surface, sand, slope, brace. The guards walked her toward the door. The cabin roared. The valley threw the sound back. She rolled one wrist just enough to feel plastic creak. She set her feet. And when the rotors thundered and the door yawned open, Riley lifted her chin and said nothing as they dragged her to the edge, and she let herself look down once. Sand, not rock, a long soft slope cut by wind. The guards tightened their grip. Farid watched her like a judge. The rotors thundered. Heat blasted her face. No speech. No plea. She shifted her weight, rolled one wrist until the plastic tie squeaked, tucked her chin, and when they shoved, she went out clean. Air tore past. The helicopter fell away to a black smudge. She angled her body, aimed for the dune, braced the way training said you do when there's no parachute and no prayer. Impact hit like a truck. Sand filled her mouth and ears. She rolled, tumbled, slammed shoulder first, slid to a stop halfway down. For a long second she heard nothing but her heartbeat. Then pain rushed in and the sky started moving again. She coughed, spat grit, forced her knees under her. Wrist tie cut deep, but the edges had roughened. She worked it against the boot buckle, scraping, sawing, counting breaths. The rotor noise faded. The desert took back its silence. The plastic gave and snapped. Blood flowed back to her fingers in hot pins. She checked the horizon. No roads. No buildings. The sun was dropping. Night in this place was a switch, not a fade. She stood, staggered, stood again. West was cooling, east still burned. She chose the wind line with the faint smell of fuel and walked. Minutes turned into a smear. She moved ridge to ridge, staying off the skyline. Every time her legs shook, she named Dean and Blake and kept going. A jackal barked somewhere. A mirage pretended to be water and then laughed as the ground stayed dry. By dark the heat bled out. Cold slapped like a second enemy. She tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapped her head, kept moving. When the first orange flicker showed at distance, she dropped flat and watched. 3 men by a small fire. Voices low. A truck squatted in shadow. Riley circled downwind, belly to sand, hands steady. She got close enough to read faces. Local, not uniform. One too young for the rifle he carried like it belonged. She weighed the odds, then risked the thing that made sense and could still kill her, stepping out of the dark with empty hands. The young one saw her first and flinched. The older man lifted the rifle, then lowered it when he saw the state she was in. American, he asked. Downed, she said. Need water. He looked past her into the night like it had answers. Kareem, he said, tapping his chest, then pointed to the woman who had risen from the back of the truck. Mother. The woman, Nadia, pressed a canteen into Riley's hands. Slow, she said. Riley drank like she remembered how to live. They didn't ask for details. They didn't offer names to the wind. Kareem drove, lights off, crawling the wash. Nadia tied a rag around Riley's shoulder and said a prayer under her breath. For 10 blessed minutes, the engine and the road were the only decisions. Then headlights speared the track ahead. 2 trucks across the path, doors opening, men spilling out with rifles and flashlights. Kareem cursed, slammed the brakes. Run, he said. Nadia shoved a small knife into Riley's palm and pushed her toward the dark. Riley went low and left, felt rounds snap past, tasted diesel and fear, hit a slope and slid, rolled behind a rock cut and stayed there while the night went loud. Voices hunted. Beams licked the ground. She waited for the one light to pass, then moved with it so it didn't find her. Twice boots crunched within arm's reach. Twice she made herself smaller than her breath. When the shouting thinned, she crept along a dry channel, followed its bend to a deeper cut. The cold bit hard now. Her hands shook. She kept going. The channel emptied into a broad flat. On the far side, a ring of stones and a dead wooden frame, that old well shape that every desert keeps. She slid into it as engines growled back to life and lights swept the flats. The well was dry, just a shaft of rough stone and old air. She climbed down until the stars were a coin above her. Sand hissed off the lip as a man walked past. Another leaned over, breathed once, and moved on. She pressed her back to the wall and didn't move until the trucks were gone and the quiet returned to the way it had been before men invented noise. Her shoulder throbbed. Her ribs hurt when she breathed too deep. She counted 200. Then 200 more. Then she climbed. Dawn smeared pink over the ridges. Smoke drifted from somewhere not far enough away. Kareem and Nadia were out there or they weren't, a math she couldn't solve from a hole in the ground. She set her jaw and started a new list: water, cover, signal, weapon. On the second ridge she found tracks and a dropped canteen with a dent. On the third she found a tarp half buried and a length of cord. On the fourth, beneath a slumped bush, an old AK with sand in its guts and a magazine that still had weight. She cleaned it with the skirt of her shirt, fed it, checked the sights that were crooked but honest. West of her, a ridge flashed metal where metal shouldn't be. She glassed it with her hand like a visor and saw the broken shape of a small recon drone wedged in rock. It wasn't dead. The beacon light still blinked slow and stubborn. She cracked the housing with a stone, found the emergency switch, flipped it to a frequency she knew in her bones. The beeps were weak, but weak beats nothing every time. She tucked the transmitter under rock, aimed its stub of an antenna at the empty sky, and breathed out. Now eyes might come. Later. Not now. First, the man who threw her from the sky had to learn she hadn't stayed down. She turned toward the mountains where the tracks braided into a road. Shammel's teeth rose in layers. Somewhere in there was a generator humming wrong, a tank farm that wasn't guarded like it should be, a door that didn't latch, a way in. She rolled her shoulder until it seeded. It hurt. She smiled anyway, a thin mean thing that could carry weight. She started walking. The sand took her footprints and erased them before they made a pattern. The sun climbed. Heat returned. Riley put one boot in front of the other and made a simple promise to the empty air: she would go back to the place that swallowed her crew, and she would light it so bright that even Farid would understand what coming back meant: fire, and she intended to deliver it. By late afternoon she was perched on a shale ledge above the outer road, watching Farid's compound breathe. 2 guards at the gate bored enough to lean on their rifles. A generator on the east wall coughing a rhythm that said it hadn't been serviced in months. 3 fuel drums stacked too close to a truck that leaked from the cap. Antennas bent like busted fingers over a squat concrete room. Riley marked the pattern in her head: route, timing, blind spots, then slid down the backside of the ridge and worked the drainage ditch until the ground smelled like oil and stale water. The drone beacon pulsed weak in a rock cradle behind her, whispering into a sky that might be listening. She belly crawled through cattail stubs and blown trash to the chain link section no one loved. Zip tie, cord, and a sawn edge of wire did the job. Inside the fence, night came fast. Men yelled at men. Radios spit static. The place felt sloppy, overconfident. Good. Riley ghosted the wall to the generator hut, placed her palm on the casing, felt the rattle of a tired crank, then cracked a fuel line with the tip of her knife. Gasoline bled into dirt and found a path, hungry as anything alive. She pulled a rag from her pocket, soaked it, let it trail, then moved on. The truck near the drums wheezed heat. She slid its hose and watched a bright thread join the growing dark stain. One match would write a sentence everybody could read. The rag kissed a spark from her striker and walked the flame slow along the ground. It took, crawled, then hurried like it remembered it was born to run. Riley was gone before the first thump. The generator coughed into a roar and died wrong. Lights blinked out. Shouting snapped to panic. A second thump rolled into a bloom that slapped the air across the yard. She used the noise the way a diver uses a wave, slipped door to door, clearing corners with the crooked AK steady and close. The hallway to the radio stank of old smoke and cheap coffee. At the end of it, a stairwell punched up toward the antenna room. She took it two at a time. At the top she found the switch rack and the jam unit she'd sketched in her head 100 times since the crash. She yanked cables hard enough to hear something crack, flipped breakers, and kicked the rack over for spite. The drone beacon would breathe easier now. Boots hammered somewhere below. She cut through a side room and hit the catwalk over the yard just as the fuel drums chose a future that didn't involve being drums. The blast peeled heat across her face and turned men into silhouettes sprinting in all directions. Riley dropped to a knee and scanned, hunting that red scarf in the crowd. Farid limped out of the admin door with a pistol and the same calm that had made her hate him from the first minute. He scanned up, saw her, and didn't flinch. He fired. Sparks jumped off the railing by her thigh. She answered, 2 rounds that stitched his shoulder and spun him. He staggered, barked an order, vanished under a sheet of smoke as another truck cooked off and the yard became a storm. She moved. Down the stairs, across a corridor now full of ringing ears and bad choices. A fighter stumbled out of a room and found her muzzle first. She didn't waste a word. Outside again, the sky started to speak in a language only pilots love. A distant, clean hum that meant fast movers had heard the whisper she'd sent. She cut right toward the breach she'd made in the fence, ate dust, ducked low as a street crossed overhead, and the far side of the compound lifted in a disciplined line of fire and debris. Someone screamed a name in Pashto that wasn't hers. She hit the ditch and crawled until rock turned soft and the air cooled a shade. Behind her, the compound pulsed orange and black, a lung failing in slow motion. She rolled to her back and stared up at the slice of sky where the jet had gone. Beacons worked. Cables ripped. Fire said hello. She'd done what she came to do. But the red scarf had slipped the net, and leaving it at that felt like borrowing trouble she meant to pay back in full. She rose, checked the magazine, listened for pursuit that didn't come. The ridge above the road glowed with reflected fire. Somewhere beyond it, a relay team would be talking about a lone ping from a damaged bird and an explosion they didn't schedule. Somewhere on that net, Reeves might already be moving pieces. Riley headed north along the seam of shadow where the ditch cut into scrub, putting distance between herself and the mess she'd lit. When she climbed out, the night tasted like metal and victory, thin, provisional, good enough to carry her 3 more ridges. On the second ridge, she stopped long enough to aim the beacon again, tapped the case like it could feel her insistence, and spoke aloud because sometimes you have to set a thing in the air to make it real. "Find me," she said. "Then we finish it." The wind dragged the words into the dark like it had a job to do. She shouldered the AK, set her boots, and walked toward the emptiest piece of desert she could find, a clean spot for a pickup, a place where a flare would mean one thing. The jets hummed again, closer this time, and a helicopter's far-off thump threaded the sound like a promise. She kept moving, breath steady, pain filed away where it couldn't vote. Farid would wake to ruin and count that as a lesson. Riley wanted the test. For that she needed a ride, a radio, and a commander with a long memory. She got the ride first. The thump came low and steady, sweeping the ridge line with a cone of light that cut the dark in clean slices. Riley popped a flare from her belt and burned the night with a red spear. The helicopter dipped, circled once, and set down in a hail of grit that stung her face. Two silhouettes ran out, rifles down but ready. "Identify," one shouted. "Morgan, Riley, Eagle 1, she croaked. Hands pulled her in. Doors slammed. The bird lifted hard. For the first time since the crash, the rotor wash felt like home. Camp Reliance smelled like antiseptic and dust. Hannah Cole's voice was firm and kind in the same breath. "Small sips, Captain. Shoulders out, ribs wrapped, we'll set the rest after scans." Riley let the routine take over, vitals, saline, questions she could answer in 3 words or less. When Hannah stepped back, Marcus Reeves stepped in, hat under his arm, eyes taking in every bandage and bruise before he spoke. "You lit their house and sent us a postcard," he said. "Now help me finish my mail." She asked for a map. He handed her a tablet. She sketched the compound from memory: gate, generator, radio rack, fuel drums, Farid's preferred door, the ditch that bled to the fence. "You hit from the east at dawn," she said. "Their watch swapped 6 minutes before the call to prayer. You have a clean window if you cut comms on the first pass. Farid favors the admin block when things go loud." Reeves nodded, jaw working. "You sure you're up for the push? I didn't crawl out of a hole to sit in a tent." He didn't smile, but his eyes did. "Then suit up." They called it Silent Ember because a quiet spark had started it. Teams rolled while the sky was still thinking about morning. Riley kicked up with movements that remembered themselves: plates, mags, comms, sling check. Blake's empty seat on the bench across from her felt like a weight that made her stand taller, not lower. Dean's name sat in her chest like a stone that steadied the hand. Reeves moved down the line and tapped helmets, his way of saying things words never quite got right. The ramp dropped and the rotor wash swallowed all the noise. The first pass was clean and mean. Jet stitched the east wall and the tower with controlled fire that erased jammers and pride in the same second. The world bloomed and went quiet again under the headset's dull. "Go, go, go," Reeves called. Boots hit dirt. Riley's team flowed left, hugging shadow, clearing short. She felt the fight settle into the place it always did: calm, cold, simple. 1 door, 2 bodies, clear. Hallway, cross, hold. A runner cut the corner yelling for a radio that wasn't coming. He dropped when he met her muzzle. They rolled the admin block while the far yard cooked off in a chorus that said fuel and bad planning were finally paying their debts. Farid made his stand by a steel desk with maps half burned and a pistol that barked louder than it bit. He looked smaller without the crowd, just a man who had believed the ground would always belong to him. He raised the gun. Riley's shot took his arm out of the fight. He staggered, tried for the back door, and found Reeves there with a hard, tired stare that could have been a mirror. "Hands," Reeves said. Farid showed them. Cuffs clicked. The red scarf lay on the floor like a shed skin. Outside, the compound sagged into silence broken by the snap of flames and the crack of ammo cooking itself to death. Medics moved. Prisoners knelt. A flag patch someone found by a blown wall passed hand to hand until it reached Riley. It wasn't hers, but it was theirs. She folded it and put it in her pocket. "Report," Reeves said into his mic, voice even. "Target secure. Site neutralized. Minimal friendly." He let out a breath he'd been holding since Bagram. "Package?" he asked without looking at her. "Justice," she said. He nodded once. "Good enough for today." Back at Reliant, Hannah set Riley's shoulder clean and tied it down for real this time. "You'll hate me for a week," she said. "I've hated worse," Riley answered, but the corner of her mouth tipped a little. She stepped outside the tent into a light that felt less like a weight and more like a choice. The desert wind smelled like burned fuel and a storm far away. She let the noise of the camp wash over her, rotors, laughter that tried not to sound like relief, the clatter of trays, the quiet under it all that comes when the math finally tilts your way. Reeves joined her with 2 coffees that tasted like they were brewed in a helmet. "I'll sign the papers," he said. "The ones that tell people what they need to hear." She sipped and stared at the horizon that had tried to swallow her and failed. "Tell them the team did it," she said. "Tell them the desert doesn't keep what doesn't belong to it." He studied her profile for a second. "There'll be a ceremony," he said, like an apology. "There always is." She shrugged with the shoulder that still worked. "We do the work. They do the speeches." He clinked his tin against her cup. "To work, then." Night came soft for once. She lay on a cot and listened to the small sounds that mean you're among your own. Sleep took her in one clean pull. When morning showed, she walked the flight line at Reliant and touched the skin of a hawk that wasn't hers but understood. She didn't need to talk to it. Machines hear in other ways. Somewhere beyond the wire, a village counted its losses and its luck. Somewhere in El Paso, a porch light clicked on at dusk out of habit. Riley stood between those 2 worlds and let the stillness settle. The fight had shifted from survival to meaning. Now it was about what to carry and what to lay down, and how to speak for those who couldn't walk back onto the ramp beside her. The answer started small: show up, tell the truth, do the work. 2 weeks later she stood in a hall lined with flags, boots polished, uniform squared away. Cameras clicked. Reeves pinned a medal to her chest and kept his words short. "For courage under fire and steadfast duty," he said. She felt the medal, felt the weight, and thought of the valley, the smoke, the names she carried. Reporters pushed in. "How did you survive?" one asked. Riley met the lens like it was a person. "I didn't decide to die there," she said. "I decided to keep moving. That was it. No speech. No polish. Just a line she could live with." Back at Reliant she moved into a different rhythm: training days, debrief blocks, long hours with young pilots who still gripped checklists too tight. She ran them through low-level approaches on the simulator until they learned to breathe and see. She walked them through maps and made them point out places a missile would wait. She taught them the small rules that save lives: don't trust quiet valleys, watch for the glint, listen for the silence that feels like a setup. When someone asked about fear, she didn't pretend it was a stranger. "You're not a robot," she said. "You feel it. Then you do the job anyway." A month later, Reeves signed her release for a short leave. El Paso welcomed her with heat that felt familiar and a sky so wide it made room for everything. Her parents met her at the gate with that look people get when relief finally outruns worry. They talked on the porch until the bugs found the light and the air cooled enough to sit still. A neighbor kid saluted awkwardly when he spotted the uniform. She laughed and saluted back. The next morning she jogged her old route past the high school and the diner and the field where she learned to run in boots. People waved. Some stopped her, said thank you, said they watched the news. She kept the replies simple. "We all did our jobs," she said. Some gave more. The ceremony requests kept coming. Most she declined. One she accepted, at a small VFW hall where the coffee was bad and the stories were real. A Vietnam vet took her hand and squeezed like a teammate. "You kept your head," he said. "That's the trick." She nodded. "I had help," she answered, and meant every name. That night she opened a box and laid out a folded flag, for stones, and a small strip of fabric cut from a flight glove that survived what the rest did not. She wrote each name on a card and tucked it under the stones. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. Before her leave ended, she went back to the desert once more, this time by choice, with a 2-ship escort and permission to walk the crash site before the last of it was hauled away. The ground still smelled like burned fuel when the wind shifted. She set the stones on a low rise where you could see the approach path and the ridge that had hidden the tube. She pressed her palm to the sand and said their names out loud. No speech. No crowd. Just the sound of a rotor far off and the feeling that talking like this counted. On the flight back to Reliant, she sat by the door and watched the land roll under them. Kareem and Nadia crossed her mind like a road you still plan to take. She'd asked Reeves to push a quiet fund through a quiet channel for villages that got hit whenever a fight came near. He didn't ask why. He signed. Little things add up if you keep doing them. That was the plan now. When orders came down for a stateside assignment, survival, evasion, resistance, escape, she said yes. The first class filed in wide-eyed, phones put away because the syllabus scared them just enough. She wrote 2 words on the board, keep moving. She told them about water rations, cold nights, reading ground, building a signal from junk. She told them about a beacon light that blinked even when a drone looked dead, and what it feels like when a jet answers a whisper. She didn't tell them they would be heroes. She told them they would be ready. Months passed. The ache in her shoulder turned into a reminder she could ignore when it mattered. The nightmares got shorter. The good nights got longer. Sometimes she'd wake before dawn, see El Paso in her head, and think about the porch light, the easy road, the way life can be simple if you let it. Then she'd stand, lace her boots, and make the coffee so early it tasted like determination. Work called. People depended on her to show up right and steady. One afternoon Reeves called from a number that always meant business. You good? He asked. Good enough, she said. He told her the thing commanders tell people they trust. We'll need you for a review panel. Lessons learned. Make sure what you know doesn't get lost. She agreed. They hung up without extra words. That night she sat with a notepad and wrote out the list she wished she'd had years ago. See the glint. Trust the gut. Assume the valley is bait. Plan the left and low. Name your people and carry them forward. She underlined that last one twice. The next morning she stood on a flight line stateside and watched a hawk lift into clean air. She touched the rail and felt the vibration in her bones. She didn't pray for safety. She trusted the training and the crew and the stubbornness of machines that want to come home. The ramp was empty beside her and somehow still full. She squared her shoulders and breathed in. The work wasn't about medals or headlines. It was about making sure the next crew threaded the pass and came back laughing at how tight it was. It was about teaching them the one rule that had carried her across a bleak stretch of sand and back into the light: when the world says stop, you keep moving.